Jen, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, absolutely. This is her first podcast recording, y'all, and I'm so excited. Before we even get started in learning more about your story, I would love for you to introduce yourself for people who are meeting you for the first time. Let everyone know who is Jen Tran.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Tran. I would describe myself as a friend, a sister, an artist, designer, a teacher, and overall just a person who wants to bring more joy and compassion into the world through the things that I do when I talk to people. When you first look at me, you may not believe that some of the things that I tell you have happened to me. And on the outside, I feel like a lot of people may describe me as like happy or put together. But when you get to know me, I'm quite bold, I'm energetic, I'm loud, and I curse a lot. And there are times that I can be quite reserved. But what I do is to get through life is, despite what happened to me, I just want to do the right things in spite of whatever happened to me, because I don't want it to affect me that way. I don't want others to feel that way. So that's how I want to show compassion to the world.
I love that you talk about looking at you. You probably wouldn't think what you experienced did happen, which we're going to get into as the conversation evolves. But it just makes me think and realize that like you can't judge a book by its cover, as cliche as that sounds, right? Every single one of us has some sort of story, has some sort of trauma, has some sort of pain that we've gone through. And you wouldn't really even realize it until you sit down and talk to someone and really ask them those deep questions, which is what my podcast is all about, right? It's called Watch Us Thrive. So I definitely want to learn more about you and your story. The sequence is the same with every single guest who comes on. We always start off with childhood and adolescence, and we go back to that time period, and you talk about what you experienced. And I did a little research, and we did connect prior to this about some of the things that you went through, which was very traumatic. And I just want to hold space for you before you even get started. I appreciate you wanting to come on to even talk about some of the things that you've gone through during that time period, because I know it's not easy. But I really appreciate you finding the strength within yourself to use your voice to talk about it, that hopefully it can help someone who hasn't reached that point yet that's ready to talk about what they've gone through. So I just want to say thank you and give you your flowers before you even get started.
Thank you so much. And I really thank you for giving the space for everybody to be able to talk about what happened to them. And that's what attracted me to like want to message and contact you about it.
Shout out to Facebook for bringing us together. Those Facebook groups are life-changing. I love it so much. So yeah, let's talk about your childhood, talk about what you went through growing up, paint the picture for my audience of what life was like for baby Jen growing up.
My childhood was, to say the least, like very different. It was filled with lots of neglect, anger, lies, anxiety, and stress. Even to this day, it still affects me a lot. And I know I told you that I probably wouldn't be talking about it, but I just want to mention because I realized as I was writing about this to prepare for the interview discussion, okay, maybe I need to mention it at least once. So from an early age, I experienced sexual abuse from a family member. And so I won't go into that much detail, but it lingered on with me throughout life.
How old were you when that happened, if you don't mind sharing?
I believe I was probably 6, and my parents, I didn't tell them for a long time. And then when I finally told them, they were not happy, of course, but I found out that they kept it from me, that it happened, thinking that I didn't remember, but I did. So that's one part. Through most of my childhood, I spent knowing casinos. So my parents are addictive gamblers, and they still gamble to this day, especially my dad. I will easily break it up into different sections for this part. So from me as a child through age 12, a lot of my time was spent in this place called Kids Quest. So in some casinos, they have a child daycare. My parents would put my 2 younger sisters and me in there all the time. We would go almost every night or every weekend or holidays, we would be there. And so I was there until like about age 12 when that was the age limit for me. And we would stay up late. Those places, they wouldn't close until like 11 o'clock or maybe 1 a.m. on the weekend. So that was where I spent most of my time. Like, I mean, I made friends there, but it was also like, hey, it's 10 o'clock. I want to go home. After I turned 13, that's when my parents had to figure out where they were going to put us 3 girls because I couldn't be in the daycare and they couldn't leave me by myself in some place. So in the casino that we went to, it also had an arcade and a theater and restaurants. So my parents would drop us off there and they would tell us, go do something. We have to wander around for many hours and meet my first boyfriend. But sticking on to like the things with my parents with the casino, eventually they left us in hotel rooms. So I spent a lot of my childhood and teen years in a hotel room as well, just having to stay there because we were under 18 and we couldn't be outside without an adult, and we had to hide. Sometimes we would have to sit on a bench with my mom waiting for my dad, wait in the car, sit in a restaurant inside the casino for a long time.
I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that. You know, you're the first guest who's come on who has talked about gambling addiction, which is a real thing. And I think a lot of people don't realize how it can really take over someone's life. How was your mental health affected during that time?
So it was weird. And as a kid, you don't know what's abuse. You just know that this is not good. So my parents, they would use us so instead of going to the banks, they would give us the money. And then they'll be like, hey, we need that money back. They do that a lot. Or they did something bad to us. They would take us, hey, we're going to take you to the casino. You can play there. And we'd be excited, but then we'd be tired. And sometimes they don't feel like leaving the casino. So again, we go to the hotel room, but we also have school the next day. We live about an hour away from the casino. So they would wake us up like 2 hours before. We had to get dressed. We had to get home in time and get our bags and then go to school. And I was exhausted. I remember being exhausted so much during my childhood.
Yeah. How long did that go until it finally stopped?
The school part, I think like until maybe 16 or 17, when it kind of like, we could finally say like, we want to stay home. But I felt like we were just so conditioned to be in the casino. Like we didn't have money. I didn't have a job. You know, I'm still a kid. So that was kind of like, okay, we'll go with you sometimes. And other times we don't feel like going. You know, it's always like this push and pull.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to know if you guys ever fought back, and if you did, were there consequences for that?
Oh, yeah. As I grew older, I got bigger. And so my parents couldn't physically hurt us as much. They still did, but we would fight back. It was mainly me.
Because
And
you were the
so,
oldest, right?
yeah. And my sisters, like one was 7 years younger and one was 3 years younger than me.
So you were kind of like the mom trying to protect them.
Yeah, I tried to rebel a lot too. Sometimes it got physical with my parents, you know. I remember this one big fight when I was 17 years old. We were at home and I got really angry and then we just fought. My dad and I just fought each other.
I could only imagine. It sounds like you really didn't have the typical childhood that a lot of others have. And I'm sure that upbringing played a role in the relationships that you found yourself in when you got older, which is the next part that I want to talk about. And I know that me and you shared that we've both been in abusive relationships. So I would love for you to talk about the both of them, on how they started and eventually how you decided to break free from those abusive relationships.
So for this part, I will break it up into two. The first one, so I alluded it earlier that I met this person at the casinos and I was like about 16 years old when that happened. And he saw me, I was in the arcade and he went up and talked to me and he said that he was 19. Yeah, that was a lie. I eventually found out later. It was not until much years later that I realized that he was basically grooming me. So when I first met him, we were talking and we connected and he gave me his phone number. So I started messaging him. We talked on the phone. And then when I saw him again later on, he revealed to me that he was much older. He was like 25. Or at least like, I don't know.
Oh my
Even
gosh.
to this day, I still don't know if he was 25 or he just pulled out some number, but because he looked like kind of young to me, but I knew that he was older, you know? And by that time, I already liked him. And then he asked me to be his girlfriend. And so I somehow said yes, not knowing that like this is bad, you know? I always felt like those years that I was with him on and off, it was the secret relationship. My sisters knew, but I kept it away from everybody else. And when I was looking up things about like what predators do to minors, it's like they give him gifts. That's what he did. He gave me clothes or like had a car. Things like teenagers felt like was cool. Like, oh, I had an older boyfriend and girlfriend. But in reality, that's very dangerous.
Yeah, like you said, that's grooming. That's literally the definition of what a predator does, when they groom the victim and morph them into the person that they want to be so they can take advantage.
Exactly. So I didn't realize that until much years later now that I'm like reflecting on it. But then it was a lot of hiding. So let's say like he saw somebody he knew, I would have to like pretend like I didn't know him, you know, or like be somewhere away.
So he knew it wasn't right. He knew exactly, like, I have no business being with this little ass girl.
Exactly. And for a long time, I felt ashamed and embarrassed that how could I let myself do this? I was 16. I should know better, right? But at 16, you still don't know anything.
No, you're a baby.
Yeah. So that was the first relationship. And then when I finally became full-fledged adult, so I was like 20-ish, I finally just couldn't handle it anymore. I realized like this relationship would never get to the point of marriage, children, family, or whatever, and it's stressing me out. And I'm a college student. I don't want to be like this anymore. So I finally broke it off. I never looked back on it.
Absolutely. And you can go into the second relationship too.
So this is the one I felt like really changed me because it really damaged my self-esteem and mental health. Because like the first one, I just like, okay, I was just young and foolish and it is what it is. But this one, I felt like, now I'm an adult. I thought I knew better, but I still didn't. So I met him when I was in college, not too much long after that last breakup, actually. I let myself get into another one really quick. And he said the right things. He did the right things. The whole textbook.
It's beautiful in the beginning. You think it's like, oh my God, I found my person.
Yes. And we went on some dates. He lived an hour and a half away from me and he went to a different college. So it was a long distance, but I drove my ass there a lot to fix problems, to see him, whatever. And so after a few months, like into the relationship, he started becoming possessive. He was asking me, who was I hanging out with? He accused me of cheating. He accused me of liking other dudes. And there's some crazy stuff he had me do, especially in the first year. He would text me constantly. He had me on Snapchat and he didn't trust me when I was in class. And so he hated that if I was sitting next to a dude. So what he would tell me is that I have to take a Snapchat picture of who I'm sitting next to, like their arm or their leg. So it sounds really crazy, but that's what he had me do. And so that I could prove that I wasn't sitting next to a guy. He had this thing called the 10 Commandments for me. Basically, that was like rules I had to follow. Like, even if it was like a girlfriend of mine for a long time, like if he didn't like her or thought that she was too wild for me, he would tell me I can't be seeing her unless he's there. There was a bunch of other crazy rules. And I remember he had me make a spreadsheet of try to get all the guys in my life that I still talk to or encounter with, things I've said to them if I ever became sexual with them, or try to get me to get these guys to say in a message that admit that I did something with them. And it never happened anyway, I remember also like we had so many fights that would last for hours. And I remember like when I was listening to your podcast, like talking about your relationships, I was like, oh yeah, hell, me too. It would last for hours in the car, in the phone, the text, at work. I quit my job because of him, because he just couldn't handle me having to be a receptionist to guys. Like half of the customers are guys. He broke my glasses one time. I was driving and he tore off my glasses off my face and he crushed it in his hand and threw it out the window. And he did the same to my phone too. And he also made me drive back on the highway to go back and pick up my phone.
How long were you guys together?
For like 3 years. So for the first year, it was like all that crazy shit happened. And within that first year, also like I was grieving because my sister passed away, my youngest sister.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And I had to not only go through this abusive relationship that I was trying to keep to myself and thinking like, I can fix this, but also I was grieving. But I couldn't grieve properly because he was there. And I just felt I never got to tell my sister, I'm sorry, because she suspected that he was doing something. Ooh, sorry.
Take your time. Don't apologize. Take your time.
I felt guilt that I could never tell her. So for like the last 2 years, it was a lot of like try and find myself and fix myself, but he was still there. So after my sister died, that was when I started trying to find ways to heal somehow the best I could. I sought therapy. One of the things that my dad did to me was commit fraud and identity theft. So during the last 2 years of that relationship, I decided like I need to fix this if I want to be able to move on to doing the things I want to, which was I decided that I wanted to go live in Vietnam and teach English, change my whole life. So I did that. And it took like a year and a half for me to finally settle everything. And during that time, he and I were still together, but it was like I thought I loved him, but so now it became kind of like this relationship of like convenience in a way, you
Hmm.
know? Yeah. You know what
Oh,
I
I know. I know. That's why I love hearing these conversations because when we're in these types of relationships, we feel like no one gets it. Like no one that we know will understand. And it's not until we talk about it that we can hear the similarities. And a lot of these relationships, there must be some sort of blueprint out there for these predators to be doing this to us because it's so wild to me how similar each story of each person that I interview, they tell me like the red flags to look out for, the scenarios that they've gone through. It's wild how similar it is.
Exactly. And like so many things, like whenever more I hear of these stories, I'm like, oh my gosh, are we dating the same person? Because all these so intermingle. And like, I remember him saying to me, he tortured me for 1 year, but I tortured him for 2 years. Like he tried to blame me for whatever crap happened between us. You're the one who got possessive. You're the one who accused me. I never wanted this.
That is called gaslighting, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, he gaslit me so hard. Even his friends at one point told him that I think you're abusing Jen. He'd be like, no, 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 nothing's happening. Because when they first met me, I was happy, I was energetic, I was chatty. And then throughout, they noticed that every time I saw them, I would try to avoid them.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. It just makes me think about my own relationship too. Like, you really do change when you're in these, and you don't really notice it until you're already like so deep in it. You're looking in the mirror, I'm like, who the fuck am I? Like, I don't even know this person that I'm looking at in the mirror anymore. And it's such a mind fuck for you to deal with. And then there's a lot of the isolation, like you talked about. There's a lot of the possessiveness and the jealousy and the control. And sometimes it does get physically abusive. And then there's the fear aspect, stalking, intimidation, all of these things. I say to people who haven't experienced what we've gone through, like, you really don't get it unless you've been in it or you know someone close to you who's been through it and realize how fucking hard it is to leave. Because it's not that simple as just saying, you know what, I'm just going to get up and go one day. Because there's repercussions when you're with someone who's fucking crazy and wants to keep that control over you. When you decide to leave, usually the most difficult time for someone when they decide, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore, because then the person is like losing the power and control that they've had over you. So I want you to talk about like, what was that experience like for you when you finally decided like, no more, I'm walking away permanently for good?
I was so stressed, depressed, and just felt so, like you said, isolated and out of touch with myself. Like I didn't even know who I was anymore. I wasn't happy. I finally sought the help. I went to a women's shelter and I found a therapist. I couldn't afford therapy, but I had a friend whose mother owned a women's shelter. So I talked to her. And that was when I started to realize I can't fucking heal when this person is always in my face. And so that's when I started taking these steps to move out of the country, pursue my new dream of becoming a teacher, this new life, and you're not going to be in it. And so that's when I told him that when I moved to Vietnam, we're not together anymore. I'm not contacting you anymore. We're not doing anything. And he said, okay, but I ended it earlier because he cheated on me once in the relationship and I forgave him. And I told him the abuse that you caused me hurts more than the cheating. That's why I'm giving you this second chance. And then in 2018, he did it again. And then I told him, that's it. No more. I'm not even going to wait until I move out of this country to let you go. I'm just going to let you go now.
I'm so proud of you. I just want to say that I'm so proud of you for realizing your worth and loving yourself enough to be like, I'm not going to take this anymore. And I know it's not easy. I've been there too, not even with my last relationship that ended very, very tumultuously, but it's just hard when you thought you loved someone that you trusted and they just took advantage of you and just broke you down. But for you to have gotten to that point and for you to have spoken up and asked for help, I think that's so beautiful. And I really want to let the listeners know when we decided to speak up and seek out help, that's when the healing began. When I first told someone what was going on after that night, that was the beginning process for me to really start healing a lot of the deep rooted wounds that I had. And I just want to commend you so much for knowing your worth and being like, fuck this, I'm not going to take this anymore.
Thank you so much. I felt this rush of relief after that was the final no. Right after that, I called my close friends and I told them, I'm sorry. And I messaged old acquaintances who saw what was happening, but they couldn't step in because they didn't know me well enough. And I said, I'm sorry. This is what happened. And he's a piece of shit. Don't be friends with him.
Right. Yeah. I love that so much. And I know that besides going to therapy and things like that, art has been a very therapeutic thing for you. And that's something that we share. You can see my paintings behind me. And I know you're a graphic designer, and a lot of the artwork that you post on Instagram, I love so much because you do these little like comic type of drawings to really tell your story and talk about the things that you've gone through. What made you want to share that with the world? Because it's not easy. It's not easy for us to talk about what we've gone through, to draw what we've gone through. But what was it for you that you found healing in sharing your story through your art?
So one of the things I've discovered about myself is that I am like the bottle that just keep building up, and then one day I just pop. I finally had enough. So in like fall of 2021, I heard that my parents, so we have a family dog. It's theirs technically, but something happened with the dog. He's okay, but as a dog lover, and I raised that dog when they first got him too, something happened. Like he got into like a dog fight and they couldn't get him out of it quite well because my parents, they don't put a collar on him. They don't leash him. And I also know that when they go to the casino, I don't know if they still do it now. I don't try to find out, but they used to put him in the car. So they go to casino usually at night, but still that's not right to leave your dog in the car, especially for many hours. So I heard from my sister that, hey, they did this crap again, and I just blew it. It was like past midnight in Vietnam, and I messaged them saying, why did you do this? And how could you do this again? I told you not to do this to the dog. It was like the last straw that hit the camel's back, right? And I started bringing up all the old shit to them in the message, like, the abuser do this to me, or you didn't tell me, and you went to the casino, neglected us, blah, blah, blah. And they tried to deflect, saying like, we didn't do anything bad to you, you know? And so I was so angry that I took my iPad and I started drawing. I drew like this script. So like the first comic I drew about like my experiences was how gambling took my childhood. And I wrote down the script, I drew it, and then I was like, shit, okay, I want to post this, but I'm also scared. So before I posted it, I showed it to a couple of friends and they said, wow, that's amazing. But they're also scared for me because they don't want me to get in trouble or anything like that. So I did the thing that any nervous person would. You set it up, and then you're like going back and forth. Should I click upload or not click upload? And then I finally just clicked it and I closed my phone.
Pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next day when I checked the messages, it was good messages. Nobody said any hateful comments. Nobody said anything like, negative about it. They were like, I'm proud of you. That was like my first big step to take into telling about my story. And then since then, I've been doing it more, and I've been in my sketchbook, I've been keeping like a list of stories I want to tell. I try to make it like, sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's like, I want to make it kind of humorous through the images, just because I have a bit of a dark humor. So that's how I like deal with my trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the art that you do. Like, I'm an art geek too, and I'm definitely going to link her Instagram in the show notes so you guys can check it out. I just love the fact that you've been able to find an outlet that works for you. There's not one size when it comes to this personal development healing journey from our trauma. Whatever works for you, just find something to get those feelings out, because when they sit there and they fester, like you said, you just explode. And then you can go down this really shitty rabbit hole of darkness and depression and anxiety and all this stuff. So I think finding a way to release those emotions and then let them go, I think that's so beautiful. And for you using your art, that's so powerful.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I love it. I was actually looking yesterday. I was like, let me scroll through her comics and see. And I saw the one about the gambling. I saw the one about the domestic violence. And I was like, yeah, this is powerful. Keep doing what you're doing, because you're helping people that you don't even realize just by sharing your truth and your story. So I'm proud of you.
Thank you so much. I can really say that art is the one thing that has saved me time and time again in my life.
Yes, absolutely. You're doing a great job. I just want to tell you that. Think about everything that you've gone through. Everything, good, bad, and ugly. What would you say is the biggest life lesson you've learned about yourself?
Resilience. I somehow, all the shit that I've been through, and as embarrassed, ashamed, guilty, or just still feeling sometimes sad about it, what happened, I built this resilience that this shall pass too. I experienced so much pain, especially all at once or in like rapid fire, that if I can get through that, I can get through pretty much anything that comes forward.
Right.
Because like when I look back on it, it seems so far away. I can still see those things as if it happened yesterday, but the feeling has lessened. It has, because I've taken steps to build this, I don't want to say wall, it's more like these layers that I can move backwards and forwards through.
So I want to ask you, for someone who's listening, who's been through a lot of traumatic things, regardless of what it is, what would be some advice you would give in order for someone to really start healing from their past trauma?
One is the awareness that it happened. A lot of times when we're going through the motions, we fool ourselves like, this is not abuse. This is not, I'm not being hit. I'm not showing bruises or whatever, but it doesn't have to be the bruises. It can be mentally, emotionally, verbally, and being aware that it is happening is the first step, I would tell people.
I think for me, that's what really started my healing, being self-aware enough to know that this situation is not right and I don't need to stay in it. And then also speaking up and asking for help and knowing that I don't need to take this healing on my own, and knowing that I couldn't, because, going through something really traumatic like an abusive relationship and the way that it ended, I knew for me, there's no way that if I don't start taking this seriously, I'm just going to continue finding myself in these shitty situations that I've been in for so long. And I got sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's just like, you've done so much bad to me. What more can you do? That's how it feels sometimes.
Absolutely. And everyone reaches that breaking point that, like, eventually you get sick and tired. You get sick and tired of feeling that way. I think once you get to that point, then like, it's time to start doing something different.
Exactly. And then like the next thing I would tell people is acceptance that it happened, because the more you resist, the more it persists. And the more you resist that it didn't happen or it wasn't the way it was, and it's going to keep persisting. So again, it comes back to the awareness. If you're not aware that the abuse is happening and you accepted that it did happen, then it's going to keep going. But it doesn't mean that you have to accept the abuse. It just means that you accepted that this happened to you and it can stop. And lastly is be open to receive care and love. So maybe it's not today, tomorrow, but someday find the courage to be open to receive love and care again, because not everybody's after you. Not everybody is going to hurt you. After I started healing, I found so many loving people, so many people who may not be able to comprehend what I've been through, but they are open to listen and hear me.
And I feel like for me, I have not dated or have put myself back out there romantically, because deep down there's still a fear in me of attracting that same type of partner again. But, working with a professional and working with a life coach, like, she's helping me realize that Leanne, when you met this person in 2020 and the Leanne right now in 2023 are completely different people. And you're not going to attract the same person because you're not the same person that you used to be. You're not that broken little girl who was just going to latch on to any attention that you got. Like, you've done a lot of healing. And like you said, not everyone out there is bad. Yes, there's shitty people out there. Yes, there's abusive people out there. Yes, there's crazy fucking people out there. But we need to remind ourselves that there is happiness after trauma. There can be a fulfilled life. You can live that fulfilled life, but you have to take your responsibility in healing from that so you don't continue that cycle.
Exactly. Because when that person is not in your life anymore, then it becomes your responsibility to your own suffering. And that sounds really harsh to say, but it's true, then you become your own abuser to yourself. You don't want to do that.
Absolutely. All right. So I want you to think back to your childhood self. What is one piece of advice you would tell her, being the woman that you are today?
Honestly, don't get in a relationship until you've found like a healthy role model of people that you see that they are good to each other and you know it. Because that's one thing I found myself like regretting a lot, was I got in a relationship too young and I didn't have a good role model. My parents weren't good role models. I didn't know any good role models, and I just went on into this relationship route that I'm old enough, I know everything, but you don't. That's what I would tell my younger self. Don't be in a hurry to be with somebody.
Don't let these dusty ass motherfuckers motherfuckers stress you out. I'm curious to know if you had the opportunity to say something to the two men that you were in those relationships with, being who you are today, if they were to stand in front of you, what is one thing you would tell both of them?
You can't control me anymore. Mentally, emotionally, physically, I am better off without you. And I'm still alive and I'm much happier and healthier. I'm here today to tell the stories that happened to me. And although in the past you told me that nobody would listen to me, nobody believed me, I'll feel embarrassed or ashamed. I'm not afraid to talk about it anymore.
That is so powerful. And that is how you're taking your power back, by using your voice to speak up, by using your art to talk about it. And you know what? Fuck you. Okay. I hope you're fucking suffering.
Yes. When I write these stories and I draw them, I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, this is going to be a good scene. Like when you told me that you read the one about like the domestic violence, when I was drawing that hand of him crushing my glasses, like in my head, this is what it fucking looked like.
Yes, that was so powerful. Again, y'all, I'm going to link her Instagram in the show notes so you guys can check it out. I want to know, have you been able to heal your relationship with your parents as you got older?
It's been complex. So I've cut out my mom from contacting me. So the only time I see her is if I'm visiting my sister and they want to come over to her house to drop off something. My dad is still allowed to message me or DM me on Instagram or see my stories, whatever, because the thing with my mom is that, and I know she has her own trauma, especially since losing her daughter, she gotten worse, but she still blames us for a lot of the stuff. She blamed me for the sexual abuse. Things like whenever men have been indecent to me, I've told her those times and she would say like, why were you there? You know? So
Right.
those kind of comments I don't want to listen to anymore. So that's why she's not allowed to contact me. My dad, I keep it very simple with him. I don't really talk to him about deep stuff. Hey, how are you? And I said, I'm fine. But that's really it of the conversation because whenever I talk to him, he usually wants something monetary.
And I respect you for having that firm boundary within yourself and not allowing, just because you guys are related by blood, like, I'm going to allow this abuse to continue. You know what I mean? And I think that's so beautiful that you're able to take your power back. And I really want listeners to, like, it's not just being in toxic relationships with like someone that you love romantically. Like, family can be very fucking toxic too. And it's important to set those boundaries and protect your peace at the end of the day. And if that means ending a relationship with your mom or your dad or your sibling, whoever, understand that that is okay. Because whatever is gonna protect you at the end of the day, that's all that fucking matters.
Yeah. And if you still want any kind of love or care for somebody, sometimes you have to distance.
Absolutely. And not feel guilty about it.
Yeah. And that's the hardest part is like, I've had some people tell me, oh, that's your parents. How can you do that? It's like, I try to keep away from trying to defend myself. Like, oh, they did all this shit to me. But when I try to explain is that things have happened. I don't want to feel guilty. If I cut them out, I would still feel the same way I do. But for me to at least feel that like I can still see them in some way, because as long as I'm going to see my sister or some other family members, they're going to show up somehow or they're going to be mentioned in the conversation. And so for me to protect my energy, I just distance.
Period. Yep. And it's your journey. You don't need to explain yourself to no one. This is me. This is my life. This is what I choose to do. You can either accept it or you can get the fuck out of here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you don't understand it, then I don't think we're meant to be friends, really.
No. And it's not your responsibility to make someone understand.
Yeah.
I love that. So I want to ask you, I want to end on a positive note. You're on the Watch Us Thrive podcast. So tell me, what does thriving mean to you?
When I saw this in the list of questions, I was like thinking all day, what does that mean? And I've come to the conclusion that despite the bad stuff that happened to you, despite all the shit that you've been through, you still want to go on. You still want to do the things that bring you joy, find healthy ways to cope and combat the negativity, not letting the monsters control you anymore. For example, when you say yes to something now that in the past you said yes because you were afraid, you were coerced or pressured, you are saying yes now because you want to. One of the biggest things I think for a lot of listeners, probably in terms of like consent, maybe you said yes because you were pressured by your partner, but now find the courage to, you were saying yes because you fucking want to.
Oh, I love that answer so much. And again, I just want to thank you so much for feeling safe enough to come on here and have this conversation. I know it's not easy. I love that you got emotional. That makes like my heart just filled so much because I know it's healing for you to talk about it, even though the tears come up. And I know it's going to help someone. I know people are going to want to know and learn more about you and see your artwork and all of that. So please plug in how we can work with you. What do you have going on and your social media and your website?
Definitely. So I have two sides. Like there's my graphic design and illustration side. You can find me on Instagram at jentran.designer. For my comics and more real shit going on, you can go to my other Instagram page called awkward.adulting. I post things about my life, whether it's about like the abuse I've been through or like my time in Vietnam. So it's a mix of different things.
I love it. You're a very multifaceted being, and I just love, love, love your artwork so much. Please continue sharing. Please continue using your voice. Please continue healing and helping others by just sharing your truth and your story. And again, I just want to thank you so much for coming on here. I'm so fucking proud of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been waiting so long to like have this, and I love it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.